Welcome to Salve, a therapeutic podcast for digital ailments. We're here to ease your online aches and entrepreneurial anxieties, one session at a time, with our host Jordan Brannon and today's guest, Nikita Ber from Shopify. Today's worrying condition, the pain of digital transformation in B2B.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jordan Brannon, and I'm the co-founder of Coalition Technologies, a leading family-owned digital agency focused on businesses that are really looking to grow through digital enablement, whether that's e-commerce, whether that's marketing, through pay-per-click SEO, or even through AI. Coalition is out here to support you on all of those fronts. We have kicked off our Cyber Salve podcast as a way of talking to you about some of the pain points you've experienced in your growth journey and helping you solve them. We're bringing together some brands, some founders, entrepreneurs, and some amazing partners of coalitions to help you, one, understand the pain that you're experiencing, what it might be costing you, how it could be impacting your business, and two, how to actually go about solving some of those things. So I'm really excited to have one of Coalition's favorite partners here with us today. Representing Shopify, I've got Nikita on the line to talk to us about some of the pain points that he has seen and how we can go about treating those pain points. Not just the pain, but the underlying cause of them. So Nikita, welcome to Cyber Salve. We're really glad to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here, Jordan. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk all things Shopify, but I think the focus for today is going to be really around B2B digital transformation, and I think we're going to dive in a bit on beyond just the digital transformation. What is the sort of behavioral change management that's also required there? So very much looking forward to talking about that.
Yeah, it'll be a really exciting conversation. I'm personally pretty interested in this one, partially because my digital journey really started with B2B. Joel and I, our e-commerce journey, we kicked off at University of Washington up in Seattle. We were in sort of that typical cruddy first dorm, first apartment situation, and we're trying to find a way to make money while we're going to school full time. And we started doing e-commerce as our way of generating some extra income. And we happened to land in B2B sales in e-commerce in the early 2000s, which is, given how slowly B2B has come onto e-commerce, that's sort of we were pretty avant-garde, I think, in terms of where we are. So this is really personal and near and dear to me.
I think you were quite smart to go after B2B sales. You know, high ticket value, that's the way to go.
And nobody was doing it. Honestly, our methodology of finding suppliers was literally crack open a phone book, look for somebody whose business name sounded like they were a manufacturer, and the first person to accept our pitch. We're doing this thing called online sales like Amazon, but we're small. Would you be interested in drop shipping product for us? It was maybe not the strongest, but it did work. We first landed a supplier who manufactured specialty gauges for fleet vehicles, so especially large trucks. And so we got to dive into sort of that particular category, neither of us being automotive guys, and learn it and market it and grow in e-commerce for a number of years before we actually kicked off Coalition. So that's definitely near and dear to me.
That is quite niching down, I must say.
Like I said, it was not intentional. I see all the people talking about, like, you got to niche down to grow. And I'm like, we just, it was a phone book.
Doing it before it was cool.
Yeah. And it's just backward assigning your narrative, I guess. Like, oh yeah, we intended to do that. Nope. It was literally the first person. It was a lovely couple who picked up the phone for us and actually listened to us, allowed us to start making some purchases and doing the drop shipping thing. And we scaled with them for almost a decade, actually. So it was kind of a fun journey for us.
Amazing.
Yeah. How'd you get into e-commerce? Because again, there's not a ton of people who are like, you know what I want to do? I want to go into e-commerce. And that's what I'm going to end up being. It seems like people have a little bit of a origin story.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not much of an origin story for me. Like I did not study technology or marketing or anything. I have a background in sciences. I just, graduated. The jobs that I thought were there were no longer there. Looked for a job, leveraged my language skills, got into sales within a tech company, moved from sales to operational role to a product development role, and then changed industries and in between jobs after taking a bit of a career break, I was like, okay, let's try this out, this like FBA thing that everybody is so excited about. And so that led me to, playing around with Shopify. And then next thing you know, I'm at an agency doing project management. And as we know, for anyone out there that works in agency world, you know that you wear 10 million different hats. After several years on the agency side, I found myself loving one very particular hat, which was problem solving, solutions engineering. And so here I am now at Shopify, just over a year and a half in as a partner solutions engineer. So working with the likes of Coalition and company to help them problem solve on Shopify.
Awesome. So you do kind of have that origin story. Nobody really wants to be in e-commerce. You just happen to find that pathway forward. One of my favorite members of our team he's sort of a famous, infamous as Doug, and he does all of our talent shows, but he's notorious for awful puns in Google Spaces and chats and company meetings whenever he can fit them in. And he's a plant sciences guy. I think he actually came out of UC Irvine or someplace like that.
Is it an awful pun, or are you jealous of the pun?
I'm a dad. I'm a dad threefold, so the power is strong for the bad pun with me. But yeah, there's moments where I'll look over. I'm doing the all hands meeting, and I see that pun show up in the chat, and there's a momentary, my brain short circuits, and I don't know if I'm wowed, if I'm having a heart attack, what's happening. But Doug strikes again, so. Well, we are not going to talk about Doug any further, I don't think, unless he happens to jump in here with a pun at some point as a surprise. But we are talking about B2B digital transformation and really how organizations think about that, and maybe why you think they're going about it the wrong way. That's kind of unique, though, because Shopify is really fighting to get the recognition I think it deserves in the B2B space. It's had sort of a reputation in the broad market as the D2C platform of choice for fashion brands and influencers and beauty. But anybody in the know has been using Shopify for B2B for a long time. In fact, again, we've been doing that here. So I want to jump in and talk about that. Can you kind of lay out sort of where the pain is happening for B2B brands that are looking at digital transformation? How do you measure that pain? Like when you're doing those solution engineering calls, you're listening to them express the WebMD type conversation where you're like, I've got the diagnosis. What does that look like? How is that quantified?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things to take into consideration here. Is generally in these B2B type businesses, we're seeing a generational shift. So you have either owners that are trying to sell their business, so they're trying to optimize it, or new owners that are potentially younger who are also trying to optimize that business. And historically and traditionally, B2B businesses tended to be, sort of manual order taking heavy. And so what does that mean? Well, the keyword there is manual. And if you talk to sales reps, no one likes manual toil. And sales reps are the same, right? Like, what is it that they truly love about their job? And that's where that's where the behavioral change comes into play, is asking, what is it that you love about your job? Well, what they actually love doing is talking to people, building those relationships. And so how is it that we ended up in a situation where 65 to 70% of the time that a sales rep is working is actually on administrative tasks? And those are often around order taking, order placement, order processing, etc. So like that, if they're only spending 30% of their time on what they love doing, there's probably a problem, or you probably want to try to look at that and try to get them to as close to 100% as possible. Yeah. So, in terms of like how do you measure it? Well, that's how you measure it, right? Like you can see how much of their day is spent doing administrative tasks, and how much of it is actually out in the field building those relationships so that people can go and buy from their company.
Yeah. One of the things I find interesting is sales. When we're working with B2B merchants, sales is one of those areas where you have the clearest connection between KPIs and performance. Sales revenue. How do we do this month? How did we do this month? How do we do this month? Is this account growing? Is it shrinking? Are they gone? Did they go to somebody else? And so that metric is just so easy. But what I find is that because it's so easy, a lot of B2B companies negate data anywhere else. And so that time tracking is bad, time reporting is bad. So maybe there's just some optics issues where from a management layer, you're just seeing into the sales org and seeing anything other than who's my top seller this month maybe is hard. Have you encountered that? Is that something you've seen as you're sort of working through some of these projects?
Yeah, we're totally seeing that. Like when you're looking at businesses, they're going after what is easy to measure, and what's easy to measure is exactly as you said. Like who is my best performer? Who is giving me the best ROI? That's easy to measure. You spent a certain money on this person, which is their salary, and then their commission, sure, and then you look at how much in sales are they bringing in, and that attribution is easy, sure enough. Whereas like the attribution towards, for example, a world where orders come in automatically,
Mm-hmm.
or come in indirectly from the seller, well, are you willing to give attribution to that seller because they're in their book of business?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the conversations where things get interesting because you as a business owner need to start making those decisions where do I want to potentially scrap commission-based sales and just pay everyone a bit more, and put in a process where everything is a bit more autonomous from an order placement perspective? Or do I still want to keep that commission structure and value that relationship building that my sellers are doing by virtue of assigning them a book of business that they are maintaining, that they are growing?
Mm-hmm.
And so even if their buyer comes in and buys from the website directly, for example, and
Yep.
not through the seller, well, I'll still attribute that sale to that individual because they're in their book of business, and I know that I know I can't, it's difficult to measure, but I know that they are growing that account.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it goes back to the same story where this becomes also potentially an easy way to measure the ROI. Is the account growing,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the channel of where the order came from?
Yep.
And so yeah, there's conversations to be had, and 100% there's easy ways to measure it today, but there's potentially easier ways to measure it in the future too, and in a way that allows your staff to actually be more efficient with their time.
Yeah. I think that is, you touched on a couple of things, which are maybe some of the reasons that sales organizations inside of B2B focused companies are especially resistant to digital transformation. You mentioned maybe we take away commission, and that's often the moment someone hears e-commerce, they go, whoa, hey, you can't replace me with a website. That sort of mindset really seems to kick in. And I think one of the things that's really helpful with a project like digital transformation is you can use it to enforce and inform behavioral change. Because again, one of the things we've seen with some of our B2B merchants is once they've onboarded to a more holistic and complete B2B e-commerce experience, suddenly they can look and they can say, you know what, I've got Bob out here. He does $1 million a month and Bob is killing it, but it's 3 accounts. And all Bob is doing is just going back to those same accounts, placing the same order for the high volume merchant. And so I now know a little bit more about what's happening. It's either this is a really easy account or Bob has a great relationship there. And I now can sort of understand that revenue in a little bit more meaningful way. Now, on the other side, I may have a Joe, and Joe is the hungry guy. He's boots on the ground and he is scrappy. And so he's finding a way to get into, a industrial facility of some kind, talk to the facilities manager, and he just somehow does that, which is difficult, and it's a skill set. And that's where all of his orders come. He's maybe bad at the relational side, bad at the repeat order side, but we are seeing a lot of new accounts starting to show up. We built some tracking around that where, again, we can see new customer accounts being onboarded by one salesperson, repeat orders for another, change over time. Is it recurring parts that are being ordered every month? And it starts to really help. Again, it informs behavioral change where sometimes, again, the goal is start with behavioral change, but we can also continue to evolve together where we can really understand how sales can work more effectively with e-commerce. Now, a lot of people, when they hear digital transformation, first trigger thought is, what's your software solution? What's your tech stack? And you actually, in our prior conversation, you said that that's the wrong starting point for B2B companies. Why do you believe that?
I the reason is, if you're going through digital transformation, especially in the B2B context, odds are you're going from, pen and paper or an email order intake process. And I think you need to take into account, what does your team look like? What is your team willing to accept in terms of change before you even go down the route of understanding what is the right solution? Because
Um,
if your company if you as a leader have not been able to instill a sort of a mentality of, okay, we're going to grow, but in order to grow, that we may have some short-term pain because we're
mhm.
adjusting to the way that we're doing business, well, then your business won't be ready to go through that digital transformation. And you need to prepare the ground. So what does that mean? You want to understand, is Bob willing to accept that not all the orders are going to be coming in through him, but maybe go through the online process? If he's okay with that, what what is he expecting? Is he expecting that all the orders now are attributed to him,
Mhm.
or is he expecting that, or is he scared that he's going to lose all of it, and then maybe he's going to take his business and take it elsewhere, right? Like
Yeah.
that's something that you have to keep in mind. And so when it comes to like, well, when I say like you want to make sure that you're not just going straight into an RFP,
Mhm.
asking for what is the right platform to use. You want to understand, what is it that your team is willing to endure? What are
Mhm.
you willing to endure? And what do you want your processes to look like on the other side?
Yeah.
And from there on out, then you can start to have that discussion around, okay, do I need somewhere where my customers are able to place orders themselves? Do I need somewhere that the customers are able to place the orders, but then have an approval process of some kind,
Mhm.
etc.? And then you have that sort of feature identification, because you're not going from, I have an established way of doing business online and I'm looking for a new platform. You're going from, I don't have an established way to do business online. I need to work out, what are my expectations.
Mm. And I think one of the things that's actually really interesting about the RFP process that we see is it's often departmentally driven and very unilateral, meaning IT does it, marketing does it, maybe there's an existing e-commerce team or department that does it. And if the CEO buys in or the executive team buys in, it's a forced through, everybody else is along for the ride. And that's where you see a lot of failure, actually, because there isn't sort of that conversation about behavioral change and what sort of the upsides might be. Again, talking about some of our experience in the space, when we can go to a salesperson and say, like, hey, we're going to automate, we're going to have essentially subscription type functionality for some of your customers. And there's a plan for that. A lot of them get excited about it because all of a sudden that experience of, I have to go out to a small account and do an inventory count myself because their warehouse manager isn't going to do it. So I'm now on site. I've got 5 hours in my day with a relatively small account, but it's a legacy one that I can't lose. And instead of, hey, I can set up this subscription process and it refills a minimum inventory of a particular product we know they use all the time, and I can cut back my visits in half, all of a sudden e-commerce is a win. It changes their behavior in a good way. And maybe there's some downsides to that. Maybe is some negotiation around commission value on a subscription order versus the one you manually counted. But again, if I'm the Bob, or if I'm, I don't remember who I chose, Joe, if I'm the Bob or the Joe, and I want to be out there getting the new higher value account, all of a sudden I've been freed up with some time. I still get some value out of this account. If they want to increase their order and do something manually, they still have to talk to me, and there's a win there. And then on the flip side, like, very few salespeople, especially working in complex B2B environments, are mistake free. And many of them recognize that and will quantify that. I lost this account because I forgot to get the order in on time. I misplaced the order for this particular product. When you can go through And e-commerce can become a source of truth that's shared with the customer, with the buyer on the other side, your team, your management, internal sales or fulfillment or whoever it is. All of a sudden, that margin for error really goes down. Your relationship with your accounts goes up, and you see sort of another win. Again, just because the behavioral process has shifted. I'm not necessarily doing order entry. I'm now doing order QA and actually providing some value in the process beyond just kind of typing away on a keyboard.
100%. I think there's a few things that you mentioned there that I kind of want to double click on. One is like that when you talk about the executive buy-in is often not enough. You need the team buy-in as well. And for such a massive transformation, 100%. Like who is the team on the ground actually doing the sales? Well, it's the sales team, and you want to make sure that they're on board with whatever process you're going to put into place. The other point that you made, which was like, okay, like around subscriptions, like, okay, is it the same amount of commission for a subscriptions order versus a one-time order? Well, that's when you go, show me the incentive, I'll show you the behavior.
Yep.
You want to make sure that is well structured. And that's part of that exact same conversation that we were talking about earlier, which was you don't want to choose a platform first. You want to understand what will your processes look like? What will that structure look like? Maybe you won't go into such level of detail, but it's something that you want to consider before you decide on what platform to go with. And I think the last point, which was, you mentioned self-service, basically adoption on the buyer side. What I would argue is on the seller side as well, right? There's a lot of value there. And as you mentioned, like the seller having to call the branch manager or the warehouse manager to understand what are the inventory levels before being able to submit an order. Well, if you do a successful digital transformation, you reduce that overhead, you reduce that sort of time to understanding what is happening. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And so I think we talk a lot about self-service adoption from a buyer side, but there's a lot of self-service adoption that can happen as a result of this transformation on the seller side as well. And all in all, what that means is that you have like a general reduction of routine customer service tickets. And to your last point, which was, instead of having to do the manual work of inputting the same order every month, for example, you can you can do more QA work, but because you are more building that relationship with your customer, the seller is able to QA the order, but also be like, hey, I was just on the phone with them. They mentioned they needed some more fittings for this plumbing job, but I don't see that they actually submitted this. Let me go update the order. I'll call them up again to confirm, and off you go. And guess what? You've saved them a tremendous amount of time, because maybe instead of being delayed by a few days now because they didn't order the parts in time, well, now all of a sudden everything is set. You saved them some time. They're happy. They're 100% going to buy from you again, because maybe you saved them thousands of dollars because of not being late on a job.
And you created value, right? Like that's part of like I as a person brought value that wouldn't have been present with the e-commerce platform. Maybe let's do an exercise of compare and contrast. So digital transformation, or maybe in the process even of digital transformation for B2B, but maybe not thinking about the behaviors in the right way. What does that experience look like? And what are the outcomes like? Maybe again, sort of we're focused on pain, so let's kind of maybe dial in on those, but then contrast that, sort of best practices. We really do address behavioral needs, and behavioral change is part of our effort, and we see sort of this alternative outcome. Give me a kind of a narrative for me there.
Yeah, so let's take a look first. So if we're gonna evaluate what good looked like in the past, and then what would good look like in the future, or in the future state. And so after this digital transformation, well, let's look at the before. The before is, number one, is manual order processing. Just it takes a lot of time, but it creates bottlenecks, right? Like you have these individuals that they may have been super successful, but they become bottlenecks because the day that they become super successful, they just get more and more orders that need to be placed. And guess what? they will start falling behind
Mm-hmm.
because of the manual toil.
Yep.
Then we start talking about potentially having separate or disparate systems for different channels. Well, guess what? That starts creating silos and
Mm-hmm.
territorial behavior. Again,
Yep.
show me the incentive, I'll show you the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also start seeing that sort of, unless you address the behavioral side, which is what we were talking about, like how do you split regions? How do you split customers? How do you create those commission structures? So depending on what that looks like, you may have had in the past sales teams that would just hoard customer information and not actually share insights, not because they're competitive and they want to be at the top of the scale. Maybe they're not sharing the fact that, hey, I was on the call with my customer. I asked them this question, or I went through this line of questioning, and I uncovered X more business.
Yep.
Well, if they're
Mm-hmm.
competing to be top of the charts, and potentially getting an extra bonus, well, they might not want to share that because everybody's competitive by nature.
Yep.
And then buyers from like the actual buyer perspective, they get trained to work around the system instead of with it. And that's just not pleasant for anyone. It also means that you sort of start seeing those bottlenecks on the buyer side, where only that singular person who knows how to buy from your system is able to actually place the orders. Again, bottlenecks, it creates delays, costs, all of it. And then finally, like I think we talked about, and like it's ultimately around collecting data. You want to make sure that you are driving your business decisions based on data. Well, if you have all these separate systems, you have this manual tool, you have manual order placement. Well, guess what? You don't have data that is readily accessible, and you're not able to have correct or accurate insights for you to make successful business decisions.
Yeah.
And so all of that taken into consideration, that's what the old world would look like. Now, if we were to consider what the new world vision would be, well, first of all, you would have a singular system where both buyer and seller are able to come in, understand what are the inventory positions. What have I ordered in the past? What has my customer ordered in the past? Oh, I've noticed that they actually have been self-serving with these additional fittings. Actually, I know that we can offer an additional discount if they buy an extra 2 per week or something. Therefore, I'm going to create that value, like you said, by telling them, hey, look, maybe you consider this the additional purchase so that you can get that additional discount. Or again, that same value around, hey, I was just on a call with them, they're missing something from their order. Let me make sure that they go in and do it.
Yeah.
All of this self-serve on both sides. And then if you have this unified commerce, this unified platform that where everyone is able to go in, see what are the inventory positions, seeing what is the full catalog, understanding what does pricing look like, understanding what is my order history, understanding what is my customer's order history. Well, guess what? You start to look at your business far more holistically. You're able to identify patterns. You're able to identify who is your best seller because this book of business is doing much better. That you're able to identify, okay, let's bring in this person. Maybe we'll do some additional training with the rest of the team based on what this person is doing with their accounts. But also just much wider, you're able to make more decisive decisions around what do I want to invest in my business? Do I want to invest in a larger warehouse because I can see that actually we're not able to fulfill all of our orders, or we're seeing that we're running out of stock a bit too soon. And so it's actually worthwhile for us to hold more inventory. So let's do that. Maybe it's the opposite. We're not selling through enough. And I can see that clearly in my Shopify dashboard that's not happening. So let's reduce the purchase order on the next one that we submit. So all of these things allow you to be a lot more effective and efficient, and that applies across the board. It goes from the C-suite to the team that is actually on the ground, fulfilling the orders, selling the products, everybody is able to see a much wider picture
Mm-hmm.
of their business, and so everybody can be far more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things we love about the Shopify experience as it applies to B2B has been sort of the growing reality that with B2B, increasingly the thing that leads behavior is consumer e-commerce shopping. And so your buyers, your sellers, I mean, every person in this chain in some ways comes pre-trained with certain behavioral expectations. And a lot of the behavioral issues you have already as a B2B organization when you start the digital transformation project are things that could already be solved if you had really strong consumer technologies. That's sort of how I've really liked the Shopify approach, where it's a unified commerce experience where it says, yes, there's absolutely real needs for B2B, which are distinct, they're challenging, they're complex to address, they're often hyper unique. Some of the things I hate about the B2B label is I'll talk to, oh, I'm a B2B electrical parts supplier in Minnesota. You know what we do, right? And like, well, we've done 10 other sites like that, but my guess is that you're doing something real weird because you're B2B. And I think like I love the Shopify flexibility. I love the fact that we sort of are ready with a really solid consumer experience, even if the technology and the features enable highly complex B2B, because it's very intuitive for all parties. And you're not trying to force behavioral change where I'm used to shopping on Amazon in the B2B marketplace already. Why are you making me do something weird and different on your site? Or I'm as a salesperson, I'm coming in with certain experiences and certain expectations about how I can navigate. Everybody's got a tablet now in the field. You know, uh, why is our site weird? Why is it clunky? Why don't I have this data? And again, we can address those behaviors beforehand because of sort of that unified commerce approach. Maybe with our closing time, uh, any specific projects that you've been a part of, you don't have to name names, but just that you've been a part of working with Shopify where you've been like, this is case in point. Like this is sort of that profile of like it went badly, maybe even, in terms that you wish there was some more thought process on this conversation, or the opposite. You just felt like they really understood the challenge of behavioral transformation and modification before we got to the digital transformation piece. Anything like that you would be able to share with our audience?
I'm trying to think of one specifically. Nothing necessarily comes to mind. Again, like I think what's important to note for the people on the other end is that like my focus a lot has been on partner solutions engineering. So I do a lot of pre-sales. I do a lot
Mm-hmm.
of, and so often people come to me without necessarily naming the
Mm-hmm.
brand that they want to work with. Um, but I'll pivot it slightly and but still stay on the B2B topic. And this may be more of us sort of focus on digital transformation as opposed to necessarily the behavioral change. But again, behavioral change also happened, and you'll understand why. So one of the flagship customers that we early on we got on B2B was Carrier, so the HVAC company.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, Carrier came basically with dozens of brands and therefore dozens of ERPs that needed to be connected. I think they whenever they onboarded a new brand, so they would acquire a new brand or spin off a new brand, whatever it is, they would obviously already had very good software development lifecycle processes, but still, every single time they'd have to spin up a new website, they would have to spend around $1 million is the rough number that I heard. Don't quote me on that, but
Yep.
that is the number that I heard. And so what does that mean? That's a lot of overhead if you're potentially trying out a new business, even for a company like Carrier. Like,
Yeah.
let's not kid ourselves. $1 million is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they came to Shopify, they very much embraced the sort of let's be efficient with how we build. Let's be efficient from a process perspective. And what they did was that they, in conjunction with the partner that they worked with, they developed essentially a sort of business in a box type of setup where for the cost of $100,000, so tenfold less,
Mm-hmm.
they're able to then ship out a fully fledged, fully functioning online experience, and have their ERPs connected. Sometimes there'll be multiple ERPs depending on how the business is run, and they're doing so in a very efficient manner. So while this may not seem obvious from a behavioral change perspective, but we have to understand, and that the reality is that you're going from spending $1 million per website to $100,000 per website. You probably have some kind of software team behind this.
Yep.
They will be impacted. However, and this is from my experience, I'm not speaking from a carrier perspective, but from a general experience of having worked the agency side and having had to work with internal teams, the beauty of working with Shopify and the fact that it is a versionless SaaS is the fact that you now can make the pitch to your CFO that any work that you do going forward is not OpEx. It is mainly CapEx, which is music to a CFO's ears.
Yeah.
So if it's music to CFO's ears, well, the CMO or the CEO who is driving that digital transformation is now happy because they now have the ability to make additional changes. Well, what does that mean? That means you can focus on innovating. You can focus on delivering a unique, brilliant experience to your customers. And that is a slightly different behavioral change, but that is a behavioral change that needs to happen because ultimately what happens is that your team is now able to focus on building out like a unique, innovative way for your customers to shop.
Yep.
And there's a lot of value in that. And so that's maybe a non-directly human behavioral change, but that is something that I think is important to note is that you have internal teams that beyond just the sales teams, maybe your technical teams will need to adapt, will need to understand going forward, we're going to focus on building for the future instead of keeping the lights on.
Yep. Yeah, we're going through an interesting project right now where we're in a 3-step process of migrating a very large catalog, mixed B2B, B2C, multi-site, international brand, off of a Magento, Adobe Magento project onto Shopify. And we have this, because we're thinking about the behavioral change, we have this approach where we're really replacing Magento as an order management function first. And so we're working in sort of a headless story. We're really doing a deep integration between Shopify and their ERP and some custom databases that they've built that help communicate data elsewhere. And we're only really having to work with one team, which is really great. The merchandising and marketing teams are unaffected right now. We're really working with that internal software development team. They love it. They're familiar with what's happening. They love Shopify's approach to headless and just the friendliness of Shopify's APIs, where all of a sudden, with an old Magento install where you're just kind of hitting your head on the wall repeatedly and hoping something goes through, they really feel like they've been empowered. The merchandising marketing team are just plugging away, and to them, it's all good. It's the same. The customer service team, who's really working out of the ERP right now, isn't impacted. And so we're in this stepwise approach. We've been able to bring down that initial project plan. They came to us with, I think, initial bids, well into the 6 figures. We're doing phase 1 of just this swap out for below $100,000 and pretty healthily below that. And then we have a step 2. And the step 2 is going to begin working on that front end changeover. We'll start working with merchandising and marketing. There's SEO considerations, there's pay-per-click, there's other sorts of things that we're going to be taking into account. But we just have this granular approach where everybody knows, and we're no longer sort of having to sort of force everything all at once. And that's really enabled by Shopify's approach. So it's been a really exciting project for us and just sort of reinforces that ethos of get the teams on board, get them to sort of love the product and love that transformation. It becomes a lot easier to execute on.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up because, ultimately, yes, we're building a commerce platform, but a lot of our teams are deeply focused on building a developer's favorite playground.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, developers are the one implementing this. So while yes, we need the broader teams to have buy-in, but we also need the developers to be on board. We need the technical teams to be on board with working with this platform. Otherwise, what are we even doing?
And it's cool because, I mean, again, I come from a technical light background. I had to learn how to build our first e-commerce stores. And I got out of that as soon as I could because it just wasn't my thing. But the great thing with Shopify, again, just partially because of prominence and dominance, and the tech stack is just really well marketed. It's well developed. It's consistent. Like you said, it's sort of a versionless system. It's not like I'm going to pick on Salesforce Commerce Cloud, where again, it's kind of a black box, right? Unless you're really in it. It's hard to touch. And for these guys, again, smaller team of I think 6 people, they're in this approach of I haven't worked with Shopify before, but I'm learning it very quickly. I'm finding a lot of support in the documentation, and I hate to sort of plug it, but they're also able to vibe code some of the things that they need to do with some lovely AI assistants because Shopify is just well documented. It's stable. Again, like we're not talking really dramatic version shifts across things. And so we feel like we're empowering a group of people beyond the coalition project, which is really neat. And again, it helps address this highly complex e-commerce circumstance and take care of the human side of it, which is another massive layer of pain and complexity. Well, Nikita, I really appreciate you being here with us today. Any closing thoughts that you'd call out, anything that just sort of top of mind for you? If you want to avoid pain in this digital transformation, or you want to solve it, here's 2 things, 3 things that you think somebody should do.
I think I'm gonna stick to the one thing, and that will ultimately drive. I think the rest is uncover the why, dig down into motivations, keep asking why, keep understanding why does the seller refuse to move over to a new platform. Okay, well, they're saying because because they don't want to learn something new. Why don't they want to learn something new? Oh, it's because it'll be difficult to use and I'll start missing my orders. Okay, well, why do you think you'll start missing your orders? And then you start uncovering motivations. Yes, this was a very sort of guided conversation that I just went through, but ultimately that is the question. That is what I want people to focus on before they go even talking about which platform to use. Is talk to your team, understand what motivates them, understand why may they be averse to something, or why would they prefer something else, and drill down into that. Build yourself that mental model of what your team likes, dislikes, what motivates them, and then build it back up from there, what a future state looks like.
That's really good. From an agency side, the RFP that is well supported, those whys are really well documented in either even before we're handling the RFP or during our discovery phase, makes for a magical project. When we have, IT coming in or warehousing coming in, when the project is almost done and all of a sudden they've got their hands up, we know that something has gone sideways internally, and that's always hard to recover from. So I like that guided conversation, guided question, discover the motivation, and that'll solve a lot of the problems. I totally agree. Well, thank you for being with us today, Nikita, and thanks for representing Shopify so well on Cyber Salve. If you are listening and you are experiencing some of these pain points, we would love to have a follow-up conversation with you. We'd even be happy to get an introduction into Nikita when it's appropriate, and help walk through some of these journeys together, and look at ways where we can help this digital transformation journey of yours make more sense and maybe connect the dots back to the behavioral change that's needed to do this really well. So thank you, Nikita, again. Thank you, Shopify, for giving him some time with us today, and we're excited to talk with you soon about another pain point.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you to the Coalition team.
Bye, everyone.
Ciao.